Nothing has a more palpable impact on a nation than the shadow of its past. This is never clearer than with Russia and Great Britain, two nations that have both grappled with their respective histories to emerge with a clear vision of their inherited place in the world. For Russia, this means the glorification of past leaders to advance the cause of Russian nationalism, as well as to advance their sphere of influence, despite the fact that many of these leaders were neither Russian nor did they have views of Russian nationalism which would not be completely alien to modern leaders. In terms of foreign policy, Russia sees itself historically as the older brother to many of its surrounding nations, such as Ukraine, Poland, and Georgia, much as the United States sees itself as the spiritual protector of the Americas. This is typified in the Crimean conflict in Ukraine, where Russia has effectively seized control of an area they believe to be nationalistically Russian, and which has been a historic target of Western imperialism, such as in the 1853 to 1856 Crimean War. Past achievements of the Soviet Union and the mythicized Kievan Rus, the original Russian kingdom, are co-opted by modern Russia as inherently Russian achievements. While this is not necessarily true, parallels are drawn by Russian propaganda between the victory under Stalin's leadership over German Nazism in the Great Patriotic War, or as we know in World War II, and the proxy war against the resurgence of fascism in Ukraine. Despite the sharp differences in the economic systems of the Soviet Union and the modern Russian Federation, elements of the Soviet government are still visible in the government and doctrine of Russia, most notably in its intense bureaucracy, but also in military structure. The lower house in the Russian legislative body, the Duma, is a direct descendant of the State Duma, used in the Russian Empire prior to the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution, and also fills the role previously occupied by the Supreme Soviet in the government of the USSR. In general, Russian experience in struggling against foreign powers leads its government and its people to glorify their own history in this regard, while downplaying the problems brought by their own leadership, shown with Putin's modern actions abroad. It used to be said that the sun never set on the British Empire. Too bad it did. England, the driving force in Great Britain since it first became the seat of what would become the British Empire, rose from an absolute monarchy humble compared to France and Spain, to a constitutional monarchy, major naval power, and powerhouse colonizer. The British Industrial Revolution, beginning in the early 1800s, both gave Britain an edge in the production of commodities and enabled them to build upon their early history of mercantilism. Coupled with Britain's unchallenged naval dominance, it also jump-started their colonialism and made their empire possible. At its height, the British Empire covered about 33% of the world's landmass. Up until World War II, most people acknowledged that the British Empire was the greatest in the world and, possibly, history. But, in 1948, once the empire made the decision to grant India independence, due to a change in social perception and Gandhi's Swadeshi movement, a precedent was set for the independence of the rest of Britain's colonies. The British public's perception of imperialism had changed, and they began to view the colonies as a hindrance, and public opinion in other European imperial powers began to shift the same way with respect to their own colonies. As a result, the British Empire slowly decolonialized. The continued power of the Royal Navy, despite being surpassed by the United States Navy during World War II, enabled the UK to gain a decisive victory over Argentina in the Falklands War in 1982, which increased the popularity of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, whose policies included privatizing state-owned companies and, according to most modern historians, causing widespread unemployment and recession. Despite this, a large section of the modern British population believes in such isolationism and rejection of immigration as the solution to economic problems, which has led to the popularity of parties like the nationalistic and xenophobic UK Independence Party, or UKIP, as well as the popular support for a British exit from the European Union, Brexit. Both of these nations have been tremendously impacted by polar pasts. Britain's extremely capitalistic, Russia's communistic. While this has impacted their present and prospective futures, it is up to each nation's citizenry to ultimately decide their nation's course.